15-1, 46-10, back-to-back playoff shutouts, the Super Bowl shuffle. There has never been a team like the 1985 Chicago Bears, not before, not since. And 40 years later, they are still the measuring stick for everything the Bears want to be again. This is the full story of the greatest team in Chicago sports history. The players, the personalities, the dominance. And the question that still haunts this city, why did it only happen once? Let's get into it. Before we start, drop in the comments your favorite 1985 Bears memory. Whether you watched it live or grew up hearing about it from your parents, we want to hear from you. To understand what made the 1985 Bears so special, you have to understand what Chicago football looked like before they arrived. The Bears had won the NFL championship in 1963, over 20 years before the 1985 season. 2 decades of wandering, decent teams, occasional playoff appearances, but nothing that felt like a dynasty, nothing that felt inevitable. Then in 1982, the Bears hired Mike Ditka as head coach, and everything changed. Ditka was a former Bears tight end, a Hall of Famer who had played for the legendary George Halas. He was intense, demanding, emotional. Exactly the kind of coach a franchise that had lost its identity needed. He brought fire back to Chicago football. In 1984, the Bears went 10-6 and made the playoffs. They lost to the San Francisco 49ers in the NFC Championship game, a painful defeat that only made them hungrier. The pieces were in place. The talent was assembled. 1985 was supposed to be different. It was different. It was unlike anything the NFL had ever seen. The roster Ditka fielded in 1985 was extraordinary. Let's talk about who was on it. Walter Payton, Sweetness, the greatest Chicago Bear of all time, and arguably the greatest running back in NFL history at that point. In 1985, Payton rushed for 1,551 yards. He was the engine of the offense, the player every defense had to account for on every single play. When the Bears needed yards, they gave it to Walter. Simple as that. Jim McMahon, the quarterback. Unconventional, rebellious, and supremely confident, McMahon threw for 2,392 yards and 15 touchdowns in 1985, both career highs, but his impact went beyond statistics. He was the heartbeat of that offense, the player who kept everyone loose, kept everyone believing, and kept everyone just a little bit on edge. When McMahon was healthy, the Bears were unstoppable. Richard Dent, the defensive end who was named Super Bowl MVP. In 1985, Dent had 17 sacks, leading the entire NFL and one of the most dominant individual defensive seasons in league history. He terrorized quarterbacks all season long and saved his best performance for the biggest stage. Mike Singletary, the middle linebacker, the samurai, the soul of the defense, Singletary played with an intensity that made offensive coordinators rethink their game plans before they even got on the field. He was the communicator, the enforcer, and the emotional leader of a defense that had no equal. Dan Hampton, William Perry, the refrigerator, Otis Wilson, Wilbur Marshall, Dave Duerson. This wasn't just a good defense. This was a collection of players who genuinely seemed to enjoy making opposing offenses miserable. And then there was the architect, defensive coordinator Buddy Ryan, and his revolutionary 46 defense. The 46 defense was unlike anything the NFL had seen. Ryan overloaded one side of the line, bringing extra rushers from unexpected angles, and consistently put quarterbacks in impossible situations. It was confusing, physical, and almost impossible to prepare for, with only 1 week between games. In 1985, the Bears defense allowed just 198 points over the entire regular season. That's an average of 12.4 points per game. They led the league in points allowed, total yards allowed, and rushing yards allowed. They had 54 takeaways. They were, by almost every statistical measure, the greatest defense in NFL history. The regular season told the story clearly. The Bears opened 1985 by winning their first 6 games. They were physical, they were dominant. They were fun to watch in a way that Chicago football hadn't been in decades. The city was completely captivated. Their only loss of the regular season came in Week 13 against the Miami Dolphins, a 38-24 defeat on Monday Night Football. The Dolphins were protecting their undefeated 1972 season record, and Don Shula's team played one of their best games of the year to hand Chicago its only loss. It was the sole blemish on an otherwise historic regular season. The Bears finished 15-1. They won the NFC Central by 7 games. They had the best record in the NFC and home field advantage throughout the playoffs. And then came the postseason, where the 1985 Bears did something that had never been done before and hasn't been done since. They shut out their first 2 playoff opponents, back-to-back. In the divisional round, the Bears defeated the New York Giants 21-0. Chicago's defense suffocated New York's offense from the opening drive. The Giants had no answer for the 46 defense. In the NFC Championship game, the Bears defeated the Los Angeles Rams 24-0. Eric Dickerson, one of the greatest running backs in NFL history, who had just set the single-season rushing record the year before, was held to 46 yards. The Rams gained just 130 total yards. It wasn't a football game, it was a statement. Back-to-back playoff shutouts, the first team in NFL history to accomplish that feat. Chicago was going to the Super Bowl. Super Bowl 20. January 26, 1986. The Louisiana Superdome in New Orleans. The opponent was the New England Patriots, a Cinderella team that had won 3 road playoff games to get there. Nobody gave New England a real chance. But even accounting for the mismatch on paper, what happened in that game exceeded all expectations. The Patriots actually scored first, a field goal on their opening drive after a Bears fumble. That was the high point of the Patriots' day. From that moment on, it was a massacre. The Bears scored 44 unanswered points. Jim McMahon scored twice. Richard Dent was everywhere, sacking the quarterback, forcing fumbles, disrupting everything New England tried to do. The refrigerator. William Perry scored a touchdown on a goal line carry that became one of the most iconic plays in Super Bowl history. Walter Payton, in his first and only Super Bowl, ran hard all game despite never finding the end zone, a fact that disappointed Chicago fans who desperately wanted him to score. Ditka later called it one of his biggest regrets as a coach. The final score was 46-10. At the time, it was the most lopsided Super Bowl in history. The Bears set Super Bowl records for sacks with 7, fewest rushing yards allowed with just 7 yards, and margin of victory at 36 points. Chicago exploded. The city had waited 22 years for a championship. It arrived with the force of everything that had been held back during those decades of waiting. But the 1985 Bears weren't just a football team. They were a cultural phenomenon. The Super Bowl Shuffle. Before the Super Bowl, the Bears recorded a rap song and filmed a music video, an almost unthinkable act of confidence and personality from an NFL team in 1985. The video featured players rapping about themselves, their team, and their inevitability. It peaked at number 41 on the Billboard charts. It received a Grammy nomination. It became one of the most recognizable pieces of sports culture in American history. The Super Bowl Shuffle told you everything you needed to know about that team. They were talented enough to back it up and confident enough to say it out loud before they had even won the championship. Mike Ditka, Walter Payton, Jim McMahon with his headbands and his sunglasses, the refrigerator, Singletary's eyes behind the face mask. These weren't just football players, they were characters, personalities, the kind of team that a city doesn't just root for, but falls completely in love with. And then, it never happened again. The question that haunts Chicago Bears fans to this day is simple. Why did the dynasty end after just one championship? The answer is complicated and painful. Buddy Ryan left after the Super Bowl to become the head coach of the Philadelphia Eagles. The 46 defense left with him. The defensive identity that had made Chicago historically dominant was suddenly gone. Jim McMahon's body never cooperated with his ambitions. He was tough, almost recklessly so, but the injuries piled up. He played only 6 games in 1986. His time in Chicago was effectively over. The relationship between Ditka and Ryan had always been tense. 2 strong personalities who respected each other but clashed constantly. When Ryan left, the dynamic of the organization shifted in ways that were difficult to replace. And then there was Walter Payton. Sweetness played 2 more seasons after the Super Bowl, 1986 and 1987. He retired after the 1987 season as the NFL's all-time leading rusher with 16,726 career yards. But he never got back to that stage. His only Super Bowl appearance was the 1985 season, and he never scored a touchdown in it, one of the great ironies of a career that deserved every possible honor. Payton passed away on November 1, 1999 from a rare liver disease at the age of 45. Chicago mourned in a way that a city only mourns when it loses someone who is genuinely one of its own. Sweetness was gone, and the last physical connection to that magical team was gone with him. The 1985 Chicago Bears have never been replicated, not in Chicago, not anywhere in the NFL. 40 years later, they are still debated alongside the 1972 Miami Dolphins as the greatest team in professional football history. The NFL itself ranked them second on its list of the 100 greatest teams of all time on the league's 100th anniversary. 1 championship, 15 wins, and 1 loss. Back-to-back playoff shutouts. A Super Bowl blowout. The Super Bowl shuffle. A defense that may never be equaled. Players who became legends. A city that fell completely in love. That is the 1985 Chicago Bears, the greatest team in Chicago sports history. And for Bears fans watching Caleb Williams lead a new era, the hope is always the same, that one day, somehow, Chicago gets to feel that way again. Drop in the comments your favorite memory from that team, and if you're a Bears fan who never stops believing, hit subscribe. New content dropping constantly right here at Chicago Sports Vault. See you next video.